The gallery stood like a gleaming monument to culture and wealth, its sleek modern architecture towering over the city. Every inch of the space was meticulously curated, filled with the works of famous painters, sculptors, and photographers whose names were known in every corner of the world. The air was thick with the scent of expensive coffee and polished wood, and the hushed whispers of art critics discussing the latest acquisitions were punctuated by the soft clinking of glasses filled with champagne. At the heart of it all was Charles Davenport, the owner of the gallery and the undisputed tastemaker in the art world. His reputation for knowing which artists would rise to fame, and which ones were destined for obscurity, was unparalleled. Charles had built his empire on his keen eye, the ability to discern raw talent from amateurish attempts, and his unmatched instinct for discovering the next big thing. So when a humble black artist named Marcus Williams walked into his gallery one rainy Tuesday afternoon, no one took much notice. Marcus wasn't the type to make a grand entrance. He was dressed in simple clothes, faded jeans and a worn leather jacket, and carried a large portfolio tucked under his arm, its edges slightly curled. His skin, a rich shade of mahogany, contrasted sharply with the cold white walls of the gallery. His presence was unassuming, but his eyes held a quiet intensity that suggested there was more to him than met the eye. The receptionist barely glanced at him when he walked in. A few people whispered, looking at his attire with the kind of disdain reserved for those who didn't belong in such refined spaces. But Marcus wasn't here for them, he was here to see Charles Davenport. Marcus had heard of Davenport's gallery, and he knew the reputation it carried. It was a place where the elite came to spend obscene amounts of money on art that would one day be worth millions. But what Marcus needed wasn't validation, he needed an opportunity. He'd spent years working in obscurity, creating pieces that spoke to his experiences growing up in a world where people like him were often invisible. His art was full of color, emotion, and raw energy, but it was unrefined, an unpolished reflection of his journey. Marcus believed that if he could just find the right audience, someone who could see the depth of his work, his career would take off. And so, he waited in the gallery's pristine lobby, hands trembling slightly as he watched people float by. His portfolio felt heavier with each passing minute, the weight of his dreams pressing down on his shoulders. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Charles Davenport appeared. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair slicked back meticulously, a sharp suit that radiated authority, and an air of superiority that made every word he spoke seem like a command. He was everything Marcus had imagined him to be, a man who held the keys to the kingdom of the art world. "Mr. Davenport?" Marcus said, stepping forward, trying to steady his voice. "I have some work I'd like you to consider." Davenport looked at him for a moment, his eyes scanning Marcus from head to toe. There was a flicker of amusement in his gaze, but it was quickly hidden behind a polite smile. "I don't take unsolicited submissions," he said, his voice smooth and dismissive. Marcus swallowed his nerves. "I understand, but I've heard a lot about your gallery. I think you'll find my work different. It is something special, something the art world isn't ready for yet." Davenport raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" His tone was dripping with skepticism. "What makes you think that? And what exactly do you think I'm supposed to do with this?" He gestured vaguely at Marcus' worn portfolio. Marcus hesitated but pressed on. "I don't expect you to just take my word for it. But if you could just take a look at the pieces." Before Marcus could finish, Davenport cut him off, his laughter echoing through the gallery. "Look, kid, I'm sure your art is meaningful to you. But this gallery is for serious artists, not hobbyists. You won't find your work in here." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I've got a reputation to maintain. I don't have time for projects." Marcus felt his stomach twist, the rejection stinging more than he had anticipated. He had faced this kind of dismissal before, being overlooked, being treated as though he didn't belong. It was something he'd grown used to, but it still hurt. He had come to Davenport's gallery because he believed in the value of his art, in its ability to tell stories that people needed to hear. But Davenport saw none of that. All he saw was a black man with a portfolio full of paintings that didn't fit into his pristine, market-driven world. "Mr. Davenport, I'm not asking for charity," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just a chance. You never know what you might find." Davenport waved him off, dismissing him as he turned to walk away. "I don't have time for these conversations," he muttered. "Come back when you've got something worth looking at." Marcus stood there for a moment, frozen in disbelief. But the sting of the rejection quickly turned to something stronger: anger, frustration, and a sense of resolve. He had been written off again. But this time, something inside him shifted. He wasn't going to beg for anyone's approval. Without saying another word, Marcus turned on his heel and walked out of the gallery, his heart pounding in his chest. As he passed through the front door, he glanced back at the sleek building one last time, its pristine walls a stark contrast to the messy, chaotic world he inhabited. He didn't belong here, but that didn't mean he wouldn't, one day. The city outside seemed so far removed from the sterile elegance of Charles Davenport's gallery. As Marcus Williams walked through the streets, the sound of distant traffic and the hum of the busy world around him felt like an echo. He had spent so much of his life on the outside looking in, whether it was through the lens of his art or in the way society viewed him, that rejection had become a familiar companion. Marcus didn't return to his small apartment right away. Instead, he made his way to his studio, a small, cluttered room in a forgotten corner of the city. It wasn't much, just 4 walls lined with canvases, a few brushes, and a tattered couch. But for Marcus, this space was a sanctuary. It was where he could escape the world that didn't understand him and pour his soul onto the canvas. Inside the studio, he stood in front of a new painting he had been working on for weeks. The piece was abstract, an explosion of color and chaotic brushstrokes that depicted the struggles of a community weighed down by centuries of oppression. The colors were vivid, deep blues and bright reds clashed together, swirling in an emotional storm, representing the fury of injustice. But there was something more in the painting, something Marcus knew only a few would recognize, a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos, a thread of possibility running through the maelstrom. He hadn't meant for the painting to be a statement, but it had become one. It was his experience. It was his voice. It was everything the world had told him to hide, wrapped up in the simplest form of expression. But Marcus was all too familiar with the struggle of being seen. His work had always been dismissed by critics, buyers, and galleries, who favored art that fit into a well-defined market. They didn't understand that Marcus' art wasn't about fitting in, it was about breaking free, about showing a different narrative. He wasn't painting for wealth or recognition. He was painting to make people feel, to provoke thought, to challenge their perceptions of the world around them. Yet, Marcus knew he couldn't do it alone. As much as he believed in his work, he needed validation. He needed an audience. He needed to be seen. That's why he had gone to Davenport's gallery. And that's why he had been turned away. It wasn't just a rejection of his art, it felt like a rejection of everything he had worked for, everything he had fought to achieve. But as the sting of Davenport's words began to fade, Marcus felt a new resolve building within him. The world didn't recognize his worth, but there were others who did. As he sat down on the couch in his studio, Marcus reached for his phone. He opened an app, a private, underground network of art collectors who specialized in discovering unrecognized talent. They weren't interested in the big names or the polished, market-friendly art that flooded the mainstream galleries. Instead, they sought out raw, unrefined works, pieces that had been overlooked by the art world but held deep meaning. Marcus had become part of this community over the past few years, sharing his pieces with a select group of collectors who valued passion over perfection. It wasn't much, he wasn't getting rich from it, but it was a start. And for the first time, Marcus felt that his art might actually be on the verge of something big. He wasn't just painting for survival anymore, he was painting with a purpose. He opened the app and saw a message notification from one of the top collectors in the network, Jonah Patel, a billionaire investor known for his love of avant-garde and disruptive art. The message was brief. "Your latest piece is exactly what I've been looking for. I want to discuss purchasing it. Let's meet soon. Marcus' heart skipped a beat. Jonah Patel wasn't just a collector, he was someone who had the power to elevate an artist's career. If Patel bought his painting, it would signal a shift, a validation that Marcus wasn't just another unknown artist working in obscurity. It would be a declaration that his voice mattered. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a sense of hope. Maybe Davenport didn't see it, but there were others who did. And while the gallery owner had dismissed him, he had no idea that the artist he'd turned away was about to make waves in a whole new arena. Marcus wasn't just a starving artist anymore, he was on the precipice of becoming something bigger. A few days later, Marcus found himself sitting in a sleek, modern office in the heart of the city. Jonah Patel, a tall man with sharp features and a calm demeanor, sat across from him, his eyes focused intently on the painting Marcus had brought with him. "This is incredible," Patel said, his voice low and thoughtful. "I see the raw energy here. The emotion is palpable. It speaks of something far beyond the surface." Marcus could feel his throat tighten. The words were like a balm to his soul. Finally, someone who understood. Finally, someone who saw the depth of his work. "I've had it for a while," Marcus said, trying to maintain composure. "But I didn't know if anyone would appreciate it. I've had a lot of rejections." Patel nodded, leaning back in his chair. "I know how that feels," he said. "But this piece, this is something that goes beyond rejection. It's timeless. It speaks to a truth that's often ignored. You've captured something few artists can." The two men continued to talk, discussing the painting in detail. By the end of the meeting, Patel had agreed to purchase the piece for a price that made Marcus' head spin. But it wasn't just the money that left him in awe, it was the recognition. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt as though he had something valuable, something worth more than the sum of its parts. As he walked out of the office and onto the streets of the city, the weight of the moment settled on his shoulders. He had done it. He had found someone who saw his work for what it was. It wasn't about fame or fortune, it was about the power of his voice. And now, the world was finally beginning to listen. The days after Marcus's meeting with Jonah Patel were a blur of excitement and disbelief. In a matter of days, his art was suddenly more valuable than it had ever been. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the recognition, the validation that he had always craved, that his work, the stories he had been trying to tell for so long, actually mattered. Jonah Patel's interest sparked a chain reaction. More collectors started reaching out to Marcus, each one offering opportunities to purchase his paintings or commission new works. Marcus was no longer just a struggling artist working in obscurity, he was a name being whispered in elite circles. The invitations to exclusive shows, the offers for gallery exhibitions, all started to flood in. But as Marcus's career soared to new heights, he couldn't forget the gallery where it all started, the place where he had been dismissed so callously by Charles Davenport. The place where he had walked in with nothing but a portfolio and a dream, only to leave feeling like an outsider. Though Davenport's rejection had stung, it also lit a fire inside Marcus. He knew he didn't need their approval, but he couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if the gallery owner knew the true value of the paintings he had turned away? What if Davenport realized the millions of dollars he had let slip through his fingers? Marcus wasn't sure what he expected from Davenport. Revenge? Closure? All he knew was that he wasn't going to just sit back and let the man who had mocked him continue on, blissfully unaware of the fortune he'd passed up. It was a few weeks after his first successful sale when the opportunity arrived. Charles Davenport had been in the art world long enough to know that money and reputation had a funny way of catching up with people. While he still prided himself on his ability to predict market trends and snatch up the next big thing, he had grown a little complacent in his old age. He had built his gallery empire on the backs of artists whose names had already been made, carefully curated collections of already famous pieces that would sell for astronomical sums. Davenport had never been one for risk, not when the safest bet was always the artist who had already been discovered. He hadn't given much thought to Marcus Williams after their encounter. In fact, he'd completely forgotten the meeting, dismissing it as nothing more than a brief, pointless interruption to his day. But unbeknownst to him, the young black artist whose portfolio he had laughed off was about to become one of the hottest names in the art world. One crisp morning, Charles Davenport was sitting in his office, his desk cluttered with offers from art investors and collectors eager to buy pieces from the gallery's latest acquisitions. His attention was diverted by a knock on the door. A young intern entered, holding a manila envelope. "Mr. Davenport, you've received an offer on some of your recent acquisitions," the intern said, handing him the envelope. Davenport scanned the papers, his brow furrowing as he saw the name at the top of the document. "Marcus Williams," he muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. "What is this?" The intern hesitated. "It seems Mr. Williams is interested in selling you several of his works. He wants to make a deal with the gallery directly." Davenport blinked. "Him? The artist I turned away?" The intern nodded. "Yes, sir. He's apparently gained quite a bit of attention lately. I understand he's been making waves in the art community. He's even been working with some big names." Davenport's mind raced. He couldn't believe it. He had dismissed Marcus Williams just weeks earlier, not realizing that the very paintings he had scoffed at were now worth millions. He thought back to the young artist's portfolio, those abstract pieces, the splashes of color, the chaotic energy. They had seemed so juvenile at the time, so lacking in refinement. But now those same paintings were exactly what collectors were looking for. Davenport's pulse quickened as he realized that Marcus Williams had done what so many artists had failed to do. He had cracked the code. He had tapped into something that the art world was hungry for. The gallery owner's stomach churned with the knowledge that the artist he had mocked was now in a position of power. Davenport knew he had made a mistake. But he wasn't about to admit it, not yet. If Marcus wanted to sell, then Davenport would buy, and he would do so with as much confidence and authority as possible. He couldn't let the artist see his weakness. "Get him on the phone," Davenport ordered, his voice steady, despite the panic building inside. "Tell him we're interested. But he'll have to come to us. I won't have him thinking I'm desperate." The intern left the room to make the call, leaving Davenport to stew in his own thoughts. He couldn't help but feel a slight sense of pride that, despite his earlier dismissals, he was now in the position to purchase the work of a rising star. After all, Davenport had an eye for talent. He had simply been ahead of his time in dismissing Williams. No one could have predicted his meteoric rise. An hour later, Marcus Williams walked into Davenport's office. He looked the same as he had the day he'd first come to the gallery, quiet, unassuming, with an aura of calm determination that Marcus had carried with him since the beginning. But there was something different in the way he held himself now. He didn't need to prove himself. The art world had already done that for him. Davenport stood as Marcus entered, his hand extended in a gesture of professional cordiality. "Mr. Williams," he said smoothly, "it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard a great deal about your work. Let's discuss how we can move forward." Marcus looked at Davenport's outstretched hand but didn't shake it right away. He didn't need to. The power had shifted, and he knew it. With a small, confident smile, Marcus took a seat across from the gallery owner. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Davenport," Marcus said coolly, "but I think we both know that I'm the one doing you a favor by selling." Davenport blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the bluntness. But he quickly recovered, his professional demeanor returning. Of course. Let's talk numbers, then. I'm willing to make you an offer for your works. Name your price, and we'll make a deal." Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he set his portfolio on the table and opened it, revealing the same paintings that Davenport had dismissed months ago. But now, these works were framed and glossy, their colors vivid and bold. They glowed with the weight of their newfound value. "I'm not interested in selling to just anyone," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I built something now, and I want it to stay that way. I'm here because I've heard you're one of the best. But I think you need to understand something, Mr. Davenport. I'm not just some artist you can buy and sell for a quick profit. Davenport was taken aback. The young man, who had once seemed so eager for approval, now seemed to be the one in control. He'd underestimated Marcus Williams, and the sting of that realization hit him harder than he expected. But Davenport wasn't a man who gave up easily. "So, what are you proposing?" he asked, his voice barely concealing the tension. Marcus smiled, his eyes gleaming with the same quiet confidence he had carried from the start. "I think you'll find my terms very interesting. But first, I want you to understand something. You didn't see my value before. I'm here to make sure you never forget it." The room was tense as Marcus Williams sat across from Charles Davenport. The gallery owner, ever the picture of polished professionalism, now seemed unsure. His confident exterior had faltered. He had never before had to negotiate with an artist who commanded this much power, not after being rejected so callously. In that moment, Davenport realized just how much he had misjudged Marcus. Marcus's calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the whirlwind of thoughts racing through Davenport's mind. How had this young artist, whom he had once dismissed so easily, become a force in the art world? How had he gone from being a nobody to someone who was now dictating the terms of the deal? For the first time in his life, Davenport felt something he had never experienced: vulnerability. The silence between them stretched for a long moment, both men assessing each other, each measuring the other's worth. Finally, it was Marcus who broke the quiet, his voice steady but filled with quiet power. "You asked for my price," Marcus began, slowly. "And I'm not going to offer you the same deal you would have gotten if you had seen my value from the start. You turned me away once, and now you want in. But the terms have changed." Davenport's eyes narrowed. He had expected some form of negotiation, but he hadn't anticipated this level of assertiveness. "And what exactly are you proposing, Mr. Williams?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. He was trying to regain control of the situation, but it wasn't working. Marcus sat back in his chair, his arms folded across his chest. "I want more than money. I want more than just a name on a piece of paper. I want a partnership, a real partnership. I don't need to be a commodity that you can buy and sell at will. My work means more than that." Davenport blinked. He hadn't expected this. Artists were supposed to be desperate to be seen, to be recognized. They were supposed to beg for the kind of opportunities he could offer. But Marcus wasn't begging. He was in control. "You're asking for a partnership?" Davenport's voice was incredulous. "I'm an art dealer, Mr. Williams, not a business partner. You want me to risk my gallery's reputation on you? What makes you think that's a smart move?" Marcus's gaze was unflinching. "What makes you think it's not?" he asked, his voice calm but filled with the weight of someone who knew exactly what he was worth. Charles Davenport's mind raced as he considered the proposition. This wasn't just about art anymore. This was about power, influence, and the shifting landscape of the art world. Marcus Williams wasn't just an artist, he was an innovator. He was someone who had found a way to make the art world listen. And Davenport, despite his vast wealth and connections, had failed to recognize that. "I'll make you an offer," Davenport said slowly, weighing each word carefully. "I'll pay you more than any other gallery would. I'll ensure your work is showcased in the best spaces, and I'll make sure you get the recognition you deserve. But you'll have to follow my rules. My gallery, my terms." Marcus leaned forward slightly, a subtle yet powerful move. "That's not good enough. You don't get to dictate the terms anymore. Not when you've already shown me that you don't understand my worth." Davenport's jaw tightened. He had never been one to back down from a deal, but something about Marcus's certainty, the way he carried himself with such poise, was starting to get under his skin. He had underestimated this young man in the worst way possible. "I think you're making a mistake, Marcus," Davenport said, trying to regain some semblance of control. "I'm offering you the opportunity of a lifetime. You should be thanking me, not making demands." Marcus's smile was small, but it was full of quiet power. Thank you? For rejecting me when I needed the chance? For thinking you could dictate the worth of my work? Charles Davenport's mind reeled. He had never dealt with an artist like this, one who wasn't just desperate for fame and money, but one who seemed to value his artistic integrity above all else. The situation had shifted, and now it was clear, Marcus wasn't the one who needed to prove himself. Davenport did. A moment of silence hung in the air before Marcus finally spoke again. I'll make this simple for you, Mr. Davenport. I'm not just a commodity. I'm a movement. You can either get on board and partner with me on my terms, or you can continue to operate as you always have, ignoring the next wave of talent that's coming for you. The words hit Davenport like a punch to the gut. He had spent so much of his life in control, manipulating the art world to his advantage. He had prided himself on being the tastemaker, the one who determined what was valuable. And yet, in a matter of weeks, Marcus had proven to him just how fragile that power truly was. Davenport took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair. He was no stranger to pride, but even he knew when to swallow it. All right, he said, his voice grudgingly respectful. You want a partnership? Fine. I'll give you that. We'll work together. But on one condition. Marcus raised an eyebrow. And what's that? I want exclusive rights to your future works. No more underground deals. No more hidden networks. You work with me, and you work with me alone. Marcus was silent for a moment, considering the offer. Davenport was offering more than just money now, he was offering the platform Marcus had been dreaming of. The chance to show his work to the world, on the world's biggest stage. But Marcus knew this was a delicate balance. I'll agree, Marcus said finally, but I want full creative control. No changes to my vision. No interference with my art. You'll sell my work on my terms, or not at all. Davenport studied him for a long moment, and for the first time, he saw the depth of Marcus's resolve. He wasn't just an artist, he was a force in his own right. And in that moment, Davenport realized something that sent a shiver down his spine. Marcus Williams wasn't just a rising star in the art world. He was the future. After what felt like an eternity, Davenport extended his hand, this time with genuine respect. Deal, he said simply. Marcus took his hand, but this time, there was no smile. There was no gloating. Instead, he gave Davenport a look that conveyed everything he needed to say without words. Marcus Williams had done more than secure his place in the art world. He had shown Charles Davenport, and the rest of the art world, just how wrong they had been to underestimate him. The partnership between Marcus Williams and Charles Davenport was finalized, and the ink on the contract had barely dried before plans were underway for the gallery's next big showcase. Davenport, ever the opportunist, saw this as his chance to turn Marcus into the centerpiece of his gallery's success. For Marcus, it was an opportunity to redefine not only his career, but also how the art world viewed underrepresented artists. The showcase was to be an extravagant affair, an invitation-only event with the city's elite, influential critics, and a few strategically placed journalists. Davenport spared no expense, ensuring that every detail of the event radiated sophistication. But as the date approached, Marcus had a single request that made Davenport pause. I want the people who've supported me from the beginning to be there, Marcus said during one of their planning meetings. Davenport raised an eyebrow. You mean your family and friends? Not just them, Marcus clarified. The people from my community. The ones who bought my art before anyone else cared. The ones who believed in me when no one else did. They deserve to see this too. Davenport hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea. His gallery's events were known for their exclusivity, their air of unattainable luxury. Inviting anyone outside of that carefully curated circle could dilute the brand he had spent years building. I'm not sure that's in line with the gallery's usual clientele, Davenport said carefully, his tone diplomatic. This is a high-profile event. We need to keep the focus on your work. Marcus's gaze was steady. And my work reflects my community. You wanted me to be a part of this gallery, Davenport. This is part of the deal. If you want me, you take all of me. Davenport recognized the firmness in Marcus's voice. It was the same tone Marcus had used during their negotiations, the tone that left no room for argument. Reluctantly, he agreed, though it was clear he wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea. The night of the showcase. The gallery was transformed into a visual feast, with Marcus's bold, vibrant pieces displayed prominently in every room. Each painting told a story of struggle, resilience, and triumph. The colors were vivid, almost alive, pulling viewers into Marcus's world. His work was unapologetically raw, reflecting his identity and experiences without compromise. As the guests began to arrive, Marcus stood near the entrance, greeting each one personally. He wore a tailored suit that Jonah Patel had insisted he purchase, but it was his calm confidence that made him stand out. This was his night, his moment to shine. The crowd was a mix of Davenport's usual elite clientele and the people Marcus had insisted on inviting. Wealthy patrons and designer clothing mingled with locals from Marcus's neighborhood, their contrasting backgrounds creating a unique energy that neither group had expected. Charles Davenport hovered near the bar, his sharp eyes scanning the room. To his surprise, the event was going better than he had anticipated. The elite guests seemed intrigued by the diversity of the crowd, and the locals were captivated by the art they had seen evolve from the very beginning. It was a collision of worlds, but somehow, it worked. Midway through the evening, Davenport approached Marcus, who was engaged in conversation with an older woman wearing a colorful headscarf. The woman was gesturing animatedly at one of Marcus's pieces, her pride evident in every word. "Excuse me, Marcus," Davenport interrupted politely. "We're about to begin the speeches. Are you ready?" Marcus nodded and excused himself from the conversation, making his way to the small stage set up in the center of the gallery. The room quieted as Davenport took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Davenport began, his voice smooth and practiced, "thank you all for joining us tonight. This evening is not just a celebration of art, but a celebration of vision, resilience, and talent. And no one embodies those qualities more than the artist whose work surrounds us tonight, Marcus Williams." The crowd erupted into applause as Marcus stepped onto the stage. Davenport handed him the microphone, stepping aside with a practiced smile. Marcus stood there for a moment, looking out at the crowd. He saw familiar faces, his mother, who had worked 2 jobs to support his dreams, his friends, who had pooled their money to buy his first canvas, and even the neighborhood shop owner who had given him space to display his art when no one else would. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," Marcus began, his voice steady and sincere. "This isn't just about me. It's about the journey. It's about the people who believed in me when no one else did. My community. My family. My friends." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "Art has always been a way for me to tell stories. To show the world what I see, what I feel. And tonight, I'm honored to share those stories with all of you." The applause was thunderous, but Marcus wasn't finished. He turned to Davenport, who was standing at the edge of the stage. "And I want to thank Charles Davenport for giving me this platform. But I also want to say this, art is for everyone. It's not just for the elite, the wealthy, or the privileged. It's for the people who inspire it. And that's what tonight is about." The crowd erupted once more, but this time, there was a palpable shift in the room. Marcus's words had struck a chord, resonating with everyone present. Even Davenport, who had initially balked at the idea of opening the gallery to such a diverse audience, couldn't deny the power of the moment. After the speech. As the night wore on, Marcus mingled with the guests, receiving praise from critics and heartfelt congratulations from his community. The paintings sold quickly, each one fetching prices that Marcus could hardly believe. Davenport watched from the sidelines, his mind racing. He had underestimated Marcus yet again, not just his talent, but his ability to bring people together. By the end of the night, Marcus's work had not only sold out but had also cemented his place as one of the most talked about artists in the city. Davenport, for all his initial skepticism, couldn't deny that Marcus's instincts had been right. As the last guests trickled out and the gallery staff began cleaning up, Davenport approached Marcus, who was standing near one of his largest pieces, a swirling, colorful abstraction that seemed to pulse with energy. "You've outdone yourself tonight," Davenport admitted, his tone uncharacteristically humble. Marcus smiled, his expression calm but knowing. "This is just the beginning." And for the first time, Davenport believed him. The success of the gallery showcase propelled Marcus Williams into a new stratosphere of fame. Critics hailed his work as transformative, while his bold stance on inclusivity sparked conversations far beyond the art world. But for Marcus, this newfound attention was both a blessing and a challenge. He knew that fame was a double-edged sword and that staying true to his vision would require as much determination as it took to achieve his success in the first place. A new offer. A week after the showcase, Marcus was back in his modest studio, which now seemed out of place compared to his skyrocketing reputation. The room was cluttered with half-finished canvases, tubes of paint, and sketches pinned to the walls. Despite the chaos, it was his sanctuary, a place where his ideas could breathe. His phone buzzed on the workbench. Jonah Patel's name flashed on the screen. "Marcus." Jonah's voice was filled with excitement. "You're not going to believe this. The National Museum of Modern Art wants to feature your work in a solo exhibition. They're calling it the Revolution of Vision, the art of Marcus Williams." Marcus froze, the weight of Jonah's words sinking in. The National Museum was the pinnacle of artistic achievement, a place where only the most celebrated artists in history were displayed. It was an opportunity of a lifetime, but it also came with high stakes. "They're serious?" Marcus asked, his voice steady, despite the whirlwind of emotions coursing through him. "Dead serious," Jonah replied. "But there's more. They want you to create a new series specifically for the exhibition, something that represents the themes of your journey and the changes you've brought to the art world." Marcus sat down, staring at the canvas in front of him. The request was daunting. His journey had been filled with highs and lows, and capturing that in a new series felt like an overwhelming task. But deep down, he knew this was the next step. Creative pressure. Over the next few weeks, Marcus threw himself into his work. The series, titled Foundations, was meant to represent the pillars of his journey: struggle, community, resilience, and transformation. Each piece would tell a chapter of his story, blending the abstract and the literal in a way that only Marcus could achieve. However, the pressure was immense. The National Museum's expectations loomed large, and Marcus felt the weight of representing not just himself, but also his community. The art world's eyes were on him, waiting to see if he could deliver on the promise of his first major success. One night, as he worked late in the studio, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. It was his mother, carrying a tray of food and wearing the same warm smile that had always been his anchor. "You've been working too hard," she said, setting the tray down on a cluttered table. "Even geniuses need to eat." Marcus chuckled, grateful for her presence. "I'm just trying to make sure this series is perfect. The museum wants something that represents everything: my journey, my message, all of it. It's a lot." His mother studied him for a moment before speaking. "You've always been able to speak through your art, Marcus. Don't overthink it. Just tell your story the way you've always told it. Be honest." Her words stayed with Marcus long after she left. They reminded him why he started creating in the first place: to tell stories that mattered, to share the truth of his experiences. He returned to the canvas with renewed focus, allowing his instincts to guide him. The series unveiled. Months later, the grand opening of the Revolution of Vision at the National Museum was an event unlike any other. Critics, artists, collectors, and fans flocked to see Marcus's latest works. The pieces in the Foundation series were breathtaking, each one a visual narrative that captured the raw emotion of his journey. One piece, titled The Dismissal, depicted a shadowy figure walking away from a bright gallery, the colors muted except for a vibrant streak of red that symbolized resilience. Another, The Embrace of Strangers, was an explosion of colors representing the support Marcus had received from unexpected places. But the centerpiece of the exhibition was the bridge, a massive canvas that spanned an entire wall. It showed two hands reaching out to each other across a divide, with intricate details representing Marcus's community on one side and the art world on the other. The painting was a masterpiece, encapsulating Marcus's vision of unity and inclusion. The crowd was awestruck, and the critics were unanimous in their praise. Marcus's ability to merge the personal and the universal had solidified his place as one of the most important artists of his generation. The ripple effect. The success of the exhibition had a ripple effect across the art world. Galleries began to rethink their exclusivity, opening their doors to artists from diverse backgrounds. Collectors sought out underrepresented voices, eager to be part of the movement Marcus had ignited. Even Charles Davenport found himself changing. Inspired by Marcus's vision, he started mentoring young artists and implementing policies to make his gallery more accessible. It was a transformation Marcus hadn't expected, but one he welcomed. Marcus, meanwhile, continued to create, staying true to his roots, despite his growing fame. He used his platform to advocate for other artists, ensuring that the opportunities he had fought for would be available to others. The legacy. As Marcus stood in the center of the museum on the final night of the exhibition, surrounded by his work and the people who had supported him, he felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. His journey had been long and difficult, but it had brought him to this moment, a moment where his art was more than just paint on a canvas. It was a bridge, a revolution, and a testament to the power of resilience. He smiled as he looked around the room, his mother's words echoing in his mind. Just tell your story the way you've always told it. Be honest. And that's exactly what he had done. Marcus Williams's career had reached heights few could have imagined. After the overwhelming success of his solo exhibition at the National Museum of Modern Art, Marcus became a household name in the art world and beyond. But with global recognition came new challenges, opportunities, and decisions that would shape not only his legacy but also the future of art itself. Invitations from around the world. Within weeks of the museum exhibition's closing, Marcus received a flood of invitations from prestigious institutions, art festivals, and cultural organizations worldwide. Everyone wanted to feature his work or have him speak about his journey. From Paris to Tokyo, Johannesburg to Sao Paulo, the art world was captivated by his unique perspective and unyielding authenticity. One invitation stood out, a request from the United Nations to create a series of works for their headquarters in New York. The theme, Art as a Bridge to Unity. The project was intended to symbolize global cooperation and the power of creativity to transcend borders, conflicts, and divisions. For Marcus, it was an opportunity to expand his impact beyond the art world. This isn't just about painting, he told Jonah Patel during a meeting. It's about showing people what's possible when we come together, even when we're different. The UN Series, a monument to unity. The UN Series became Marcus's most ambitious project yet. It consisted of 5 monumental pieces, each representing a core principle of global unity, peace, equality, resilience, collaboration, and hope. The paintings incorporated influences from cultures around the world, blending colors, patterns, and symbols to create a universal language of art. Marcus worked tirelessly, traveling to meet with communities and artists from diverse backgrounds. He believed that the series should not just reflect his vision, but also the voices and stories of the people it was meant to represent. The centerpiece, titled The Thread That Binds Us, was a sprawling mural that depicted interconnected hands reaching across a swirling, colorful cosmos. The mural became an instant symbol of hope, resonating with people from all walks of life. When the series was unveiled at the UN headquarters, it was attended by diplomats, world leaders, and artists from across the globe. The event was more than an art exhibition, it was a celebration of humanity's shared aspirations. Bringing change to the art world. While Marcus's art had gone global, his heart remained firmly rooted in the communities that had nurtured his talent. Using the proceeds from his exhibitions and commissions, he established the Marcus Williams Foundation for Creative Equity. The foundation focused on providing resources, mentorship, and opportunities to underrepresented artists worldwide. One of the Foundation's first initiatives was the transformation of abandoned buildings into community art spaces. These centers offered free workshops, studio spaces, and galleries for local artists. Marcus personally visited each space, ensuring they reflected the needs of the communities they served. The Foundation also launched an annual art award, celebrating innovative and socially impactful works. The winners received funding, mentorship, and a platform to showcase their art on an international stage. Personal growth and reflection. Despite his success, Marcus remained grounded. His studio, though larger now, was still a place of simplicity and focus. He often returned to his neighborhood, spending time with the people who had supported him from the beginning. During one visit, Marcus hosted an informal gathering at the local community center. Surrounded by old friends, family, and young aspiring artists, he shared stories of his journey and encouraged others to pursue their dreams. "Don't let anyone define your worth," he said. "Your value isn't determined by galleries or critics, it's in the honesty of your work and the impact it has on the world." A conversation with Davenport. Charles Davenport, once Marcus's skeptic, had become one of his staunchest allies. The transformation in Davenport was nothing short of remarkable. He had embraced a more inclusive approach to his gallery, mentoring young artists from diverse backgrounds and showcasing works that challenged the traditional norms of the art world. One evening, Marcus and Davenport met for dinner to discuss a potential collaboration. Davenport had proposed an international traveling exhibition featuring Marcus's work alongside other emerging artists from underrepresented communities. "I never thought I'd see the day when you'd champion something like this," Marcus teased, a playful smile on his face. Davenport chuckled. "You've changed more than the art world, Marcus. You've changed me. And I'll admit, it's been the most rewarding chapter of my career." The legacy. As years passed, Marcus's influence only grew. His art became part of the permanent collections of renowned museums, his foundation expanded to dozens of countries, and his story inspired countless young artists to dream big. But for Marcus, his greatest achievement wasn't the accolades or the fame, it was the connections he had forged and the lives he had touched. His work had become a bridge, not just between the art world and his community, but between people from all walks of life. The final canvas. On the 10th anniversary of his first gallery showcase, Marcus unveiled a new piece titled The Circle. It was a simple yet profound work, a single, unbroken line that formed a perfect circle against a textured, multicolored background. The piece symbolized unity, continuity, and the interconnectedness of all things. As he stood before the painting, surrounded by friends, family, and admirers, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace. His journey had been one of struggle, triumph, and transformation. And while the road ahead was still uncertain, he knew one thing for sure: art had the power to change the world. And he had proven it.